Hey, it's Jamie East here from the Smart 7, and today's episode is brought to you by Pension Bee and their award-winning Pension Confident podcast. Getting your head around pensions might seem overwhelming, but that's where Pension Bee comes in. They're on a mission to build pension confidence. So whether you're just starting on your pension journey, you're nearing retirement, or like me, you're somewhere a little bit in between, then you should have a listen to the Pension Confident podcast. It's an award-winning podcast that digs into topics that really matter with the help of financial experts. So that could be the basics of how pensions, ISAs or mortgages work, and things like how to get started on saving for a happy retirement. And a bit like the Smart 7 does with the news, they break down complex pensions finance into language that we can all understand. You can listen or download the Pension Confident podcast wherever you get your podcast from, or you can watch the episodes on YouTube. And remember, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial or legal advice, and when investing, your capital is at risk.
It's Saturday the 6th of September. I'm Ciara Evans, and this was a week that saw Starmer look to reshuffle and reset, President Putin on a trip to China, rumours about Donald Trump and the death of an Italian fashion legend.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
But not the news.
After a summer break, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a new reset for his government on Monday. He did a bit of a cabinet reshuffling, promoting Treasury Secretary Darren Jones to a new position of Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister and rearranged the team at Downing Street. He also spoke to Matt Chorley at 5 Live and laid out his views on the migrant crisis and the need to reclaim the English flag from far-right protesters.
It's a really serious issue. We have to have control of our borders. When it comes to the asylum hotels, I want them emptied. I've been really clear about that. I completely understand why people are so concerned. The difference here is between an orderly, sensible way of actually fixing a problem we inherited from the Tories or fanciful arrangements that are just not going to work.
Monday afternoon in the Commons saw Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announce changes to the migration system. She's tightening up the rules on refugee family reunions, describing them as unsustainable and flagging that a new asylum policy is on the way. Charities were immediately critical of the decision, but the Home Secretary says it's important that systems don't become overwhelmed.
It is little wonder that people right across the country lost confidence in the system and demanded to know why they were paying the price. But that does not mean that people rejected the long and proud history of Britain doing our bit.
There was bad news for the government on Tuesday as the bond markets saw a sell-off, which will make it harder for Chancellor Rachel Reeves to balance the books in November's budget. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was under pressure too as she struggles to reform the immigration system. Charities continue to warn that the new plan to clamp down on family reunions risk a repeat of the Windrush scandal. She was also under pressure on the migrant return deal with France, which she says will take some time to show results.
We're now a month on from having signed this treaty. We've moved very fast to get the new systems in place and to get the first detentions in place. But we're being very clear and honest with people. It's a pilot scheme. It needs to build. You start and you build something and you make things work step by step.
Tuesday also saw the Green Party elect a new leader by an overwhelming margin. Zach Polinsky won over 85% of the vote and now says he has a clear mandate for what he calls eco-populism and aims to take on both the Labour Party and Reform UK. He used his acceptance speech to call out Reform leader Nigel Farage as a charlatan and criticise millionaires in the Reform Party who pretend to serve the working class while backed by billionaires.
People in this country are exhausted. They are sick of working long hours and never feeling secure. They see water companies pumping sewage into our waters and charging us extra for the privilege, and they see how broken the old two-party system is.
Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner found herself in political hot water on Wednesday. She's been dogged by questions about her property and living arrangements, and she referred herself to the parliamentary watchdog on Wednesday as it became clear that she had underpaid the stamp duty on a flat she bought in Hove. It's complicated because of her personal circumstances, but Prime Minister Keir Starmer commended her for doing the right thing by referring herself to the watchdog. She explained what happened to Sky News.
It's been
quite a distressing time for my family. The advice that I received was inaccurate. As soon as I knew, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this.
Tory leader Kemi Badenoch's reaction at PMQs was to challenge Starmer over his deputy, saying if he had a backbone, he'd sack her. Badenoch was also scathing about this week's tightening of the bond markets and the implications for November's budget.
Conservatives left him the fastest growing economy in the G7. Under him, the cost of our borrowing is now higher than in Greece. Why does the Prime Minister think this is?
If it had been the party opposite, there wouldn't have been the accountability that there now is in place, because there's been years and years avoiding it.
Friday morning saw the Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner tender her resignation. She stepped down after an investigation by the Independent Ethics Advisor after she paid the wrong level of stamp duty on a flat in Hove. The Prime Minister was put in a difficult position as he tightened up the ministerial code on taking office and was left with no choice but to accept his deputy's resignation.
I deeply regret my decision not to seek additional specialist tax advice, given both my position as Housing Secretary and my complex family arrangements. I take full responsibility for the error. I'd like to take this opportunity to repeat it was never my intention to do anything other than pay the right amount.
Russian President Putin was in China this week for a 4-day visit that saw him attend a security summit, and he then headed to Beijing for talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was also on the road on a 4-day tour of EU states bordering Russia and Belarus, and she spoke at a press conference with Polish PM Donald Tusk.
We have to keep this sense of urgency because we know that Putin has not changed and will not change. He is a predator. In the last 25 years, he started 4 wars.
It turned out while the Commission President was travelling, she appears to have been targeted by Russia using GPS jamming to interfere with the satellite navigation systems on her plane. The incident happened over Bulgaria, forcing her pilots to resort to paper maps and circle for an hour before landing safely. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin was in China, where he hinted at an agreement that was reached with Donald Trump at their recent Alaskan summit.
We value the efforts and propositions to solve the Ukrainian crisis of China, India and other strategic partners of ours. The mutual understanding that was reached at a recent Russia-US summit in Alaska heads the same direction.
It's not clear what Putin is referring to, but the Ukrainian side are increasingly concerned as no additional US aid or commitments on security guarantees appear to be forthcoming. EU leaders are due to meet in Paris on Thursday to discuss next steps, but Donald Trump's former national security advisor John Bolton wasn't sounding optimistic.
I think the whole thing is collapsing. I think the chances for peace in Ukraine are probably worse now than they were before the Alaska summit. The real fundamental cause of his invasion of Ukraine was NATO, to try and restructure NATO. That's what he really wants, as well as possession of Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin continued his state visit to China, travelling to Beijing for a massive military parade on Wednesday. The Victory Day parade was being held to mark 80 years since Russia and China defeated Japan, a slightly unusual take on the Second World War. Putin hailed Chinese Premier Xi Jinping as a dear friend, and they were joined by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who has travelled to Beijing by train. The Russian president also had some unkind words for Ukraine and its allies.
I don't want to compare them to reptiles, to animals. They are experts not in fairy tales, but in horror films. What we see now is a constant hysteria about Russia planning to attack Europe. I think it's clear to any reasonable person this is either a provocation or complete incompetence.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte was in Luxembourg in advance of Thursday's meeting of EU leaders in Paris, and he was warning that the danger from Russia is absolutely real.
The threat from the Russians is increasing every day. Let's not be naive about it. This might involve one day Luxembourg, my country, the Netherlands. We are all safe now. We think we are far away from Russia, but we are very close by.
Russia has stepped up its attacks on Kyiv, and Putin suggested on Wednesday that he'd meet with Zelensky in Moscow, which is probably not an appealing option, and the Ukrainian foreign minister accused the Russian president of messing around over talks. Putin also met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in China and thanked him for his support of Russia's war effort.
I'd like to note that your warriors fought bravely and heroically. We will also never forget those sacrifices that your armed forces and their families bore. In the name of the Russian people, I want to thank you for this participation them in our joint fight with modern neo-Nazism.
European leaders met in Paris on Thursday as the so-called coalition of the willing sought to make progress on either a ceasefire or peace talks to halt Russia's war on Ukraine. President Zelensky attended along with the French President Macron, Keir Starmer and EU President Ursula von der Leyen. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff was also present, and the leaders participated in a Zoom call with Donald Trump, but it's not clear that any real progress was made. President Macron was threatening further economic action.
If Russia continues to refuse concrete peace discussions, we will take additional sanctions along with the United States.
Trump has let the previous deadline for action, which was the 1st of September, slide past, and he has made no firm commitment on either security guarantees or sanctions for Russia. The first shipment of arms bought for Ukraine by Europe from the US has now been shipped, and 26 of the 35 members are committed to sending troops to Ukraine. President Zelensky says that Putin has to be pinned down.
A very specific impression remains, even after the meeting in China. It seems that Putin will try to use it as a pretext to continue the war. Overall, through his behaviour, Putin is trying to show that no pressure affects him.
The American part of the internet seemed to have convinced itself over the weekend that President Donald Trump was dead. Conspiracy theories had him hospitalised, having had a heart attack. Then there were detailed analysis of every long-distance photo and an obsession with whether or not he'd visited the Walter Reed Hospital. Things weren't helped by silence from the White House, and then a notice on Tuesday that the president would have an announcement at 2 p.m. Washington time. Trump turned up looking the same as usual and announced he's moving the US Space Command Centre from Colorado to Alabama. And that was it. Fox News reporter Peter Ducey wanted to know if the president had heard the news that he was dead.
I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff. Well, it's fake news. You know, it's just so... I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know. I would say a lot of people know. I was very active this Labor Day.
Apart from rumours of his death, Donald Trump has been battling for months now to defuse the frustration amongst his supporters over the Epstein files. He pledged to release the details on the convicted sex trafficker as part of his election campaign, but has been deeply reluctant to do so once he took office. He continued to claim the whole affair is a Democratic hoax, even as Epstein survivors gathered for a press conference in Washington, D.C. His Republican allies in Congress released some 30,000 pages of material on Wednesday, but almost all of it had been previously released. And survivor Marina Lacerda, speaking for the first time, was direct in her accusation towards the president.
The truth is, Epstein had a free pass. He bragged about his powerful friends, including our current president, Donald Trump. It was his biggest brag, actually. What I endured will haunt me forever. This kind of trauma never leaves you.
Donald Trump faced more legal trouble on Thursday as his administration has been sued by the District of Columbia over the deployment of National Guard troops to Washington. Trump has claimed it's necessary because of a public safety emergency, but he's already faced a ruling this week that his deployment of troops to Los Angeles was illegal. Meanwhile, his Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appeared before a Senate committee hearing to answer questions about what appears to be absolute chaos in the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control, where RFK Jr. has been firing experts and hiring conspiracy theorists. With Florida announcing plans to remove vaccine mandates, the senators were concerned about what the health secretary will do next, and Democratic Senator Don Wyden had a stern warning for them.
I hope that you will tell the American people how many preventable child deaths are an acceptable sacrifice for enacting an agenda that I think is fundamentally cruel and defies common sense.
Plans for several countries to recognise the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in New York have been complicated as the US has blocked the visas for most of the Palestinian delegation. That includes Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and about 80 others, and it's not clear what impact that will have on diplomatic efforts. There's been no significant increase in aid to the famine-stricken region, and a new international flotilla of boats set out with aid. A number of high-profile figures, including Susan Sarandon, Game of Thrones star Liam Cunningham and activist Greta Thunberg, are on board, promising to break the illegal siege of Gaza.
But this story is also about a global uprising. For every politician that is fueling the genocide, further environmental and climate destruction, there will be people escalating the resistance against that.
Monday saw a majority of the world's leading genocide scholars vote to back a resolution that Israel's actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide. 86% of the 500-member International Association of Genocide Scholars agreed with the motion and have called on Israel to immediately cease all acts that constitute genocide, war crimes and crime against humanity. The resolution also calls for a lifting of the blockade on aid and halting of the forced displacement of the population. The Israeli Foreign Ministry dismissed the report and the resolution, describing it as based on Hamas lies and called it an embarrassment to the legal profession. Former Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf told the Spectator's podcast that the British government needs to respond.
At least 60,000 Gazans have been killed. We know that there is a policy of deliberate starvation. How do you justify the continued selling of arms?
Israel's President Isaac Herzog has announced that he will visit the UK next week on Wednesday and Thursday, shortly before the UK is set to recognise the State of Palestine at the UN General Assembly. Number 10 haven't confirmed whether or not Prime Minister Keir Starmer will meet with the Israeli President, and Labour MPs have been urging him not to. The visit comes as there has been no sign of progress on a ceasefire, and civilian deaths continue as the IDF ramps up its plan to take over Gaza City. Former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has decided that if the government won't hold Israel to account over Gaza, he'll do it, and he set up a 2-day public tribunal.
So what we've done today is assembled a panel of 2 academics with myself to listen to evidence for 2 days. We've got a lot of constitutional lawyers giving evidence, and we're having direct evidence from Gaza and the West Bank of people who will explain what the situation is, but the crucial area is British policy.
Still to come on the Standout 7, in association with Metro, Wes Streeting wants to ban the cans, and we pay tribute to an Italian fashion icon.
Right after this. Hey, it's Jamie East here from the Smart 7, and today's episode is brought to you by Pension Bee and their award-winning Pension Confident podcast. Getting your head around pensions might seem overwhelming, but that's where Pension Bee comes in. They're on a mission to build pension confidence. So whether you're just starting on your pension journey, you're nearing retirement, or like me, you're somewhere a little bit in between, then you should have a listen to the Pension Confident podcast. It's an award-winning podcast that digs into topics that really matter with the help of financial experts. So that could be the basics of how pensions, ISAs or mortgages work, and things like how to get started on saving for a happy retirement. And a bit like the Smart 7 does with the news, they break down complex pensions finance into language that we can all understand. You can listen or download the Pension Confident podcast wherever you get your podcast from, or you can watch the episodes on YouTube. And remember, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial or legal advice, and when investing, your capital is at risk.
Welcome back.
A magnitude 6 earthquake hit the mountainous region of Kunar in Afghanistan early on Monday morning. The quake hit several provinces close to the eastern border with Pakistan and caused serious destruction, leaving roads blocked and sparking landslides. Rescuers struggled to access the region, with Taliban officials urging humanitarian organisations to offer assistance by air. Local journalist Ali Latifi said with people still buried under rubble, local rescuers are desperate to save survivors.
The government has been running helicopters to and from the disaster sites, transferring people to the regional hospital in Jalalabad. And in the meantime, the people there, they're basically digging with their hands and whatever they can find in their homes.
The initial quake was followed by 2 more of similar size, including another quake measuring 6.2 on the Richter scale on Thursday night. The death toll from the quakes continues to rise, with more than 2,000 people believed dead, while thousands more are injured. And Jeremy Smith from the British Red Cross said it's a devastating situation.
Our colleagues are seeing a lot of destruction, very similar to what we saw in 2023. This earthquake was only 5 miles deep, and the intensity of it was such that these houses basically collapsed on people while they were sleeping.
Health Secretary Wes Streeting confirmed on Wednesday that the government is intending to go ahead with a ban on energy drinks for those under 16. The high caffeine drinks can cause disrupted sleep, increased anxiety, and may affect students' ability to concentrate in school. There will be a 12-week consultation on the issue before legislation is brought forward. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer says it's not a question of the UK being a nanny state. It's about protecting kids. The Health Secretary says parents agree.
The overwhelming majority of parents, 8 in 10, are concerned about this and have urged government to act. Doctors have warned about the health impact of these drinks. That's why this government is acting.
Giorgio Armani, a true fashion legend, died on Thursday, aged 91. The Italian designer opened his Milan fashion house in 1975 and quickly became internationally famous for his distinctive style. He was still working up to his final days as the CEO, founder and sole shareholder of the Armani empire, and was credited with inventing red carpet fashion, which made him a billionaire. He was famous for dressing Hollywood stars and providing unique and distinctive looks for movies, including his famous suits for women. One of his Hollywood fans was Richard Gere, who says Armani's design really helped to define the classic American gigolo.
We tried them on and all of a sudden this character started coming alive, this kind of very contemporary guy. You know, that was the beginning of me getting into that character, was actually his clothes.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day.
Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Hey, it's Maya and Sim from the Girls That Invest podcast. If you are an IT or security pro, you know managing devices, identities, and applications can feel overwhelming and honestly risky. That's where Trellica by 1Password comes in. It helps conquer SaaS sprawl and shadow IT by discovering every app your team uses, managed or not. With pre-built app profiles, you can assess risk, manage access, and even optimize your software spend. Plus, it simplifies onboarding, offboarding, and compliance, all while cutting costs by eliminating unused licenses. Take the first step to better security for your team. Learn more at onepassword.com/special offer.